Well, I think there are more than 60 has been proposed to the China Manned Space Office, and also we're using the United Nations. There's an Office for Outer Space Affairs, UNWUSA. They're performing this mission on our behalf to all the countries, in particular developing countries. There are different criteria. The criteria, I think one of them I remember is that they have not done this experiment on the International Space Station, and they have new novelties, and they need to be timely manufactured. So these are some of the criteria and elements. My knowledge is that the first batch of nine projects has been selected, and I think some of them are being delayed, one or two of them, because of technical reasons. But most of them are preparing for their trip to the Chinese space station, and they're also opening this again for the second batch.
Well, they just announced the 15-minute countdown now until the launch of the Mengtian module.
So different time of countdown, reflecting different missions and tastings. For example, the 15-minute countdown would mean that the evacuation has to be performed at the launch pad.
Around the launch.
So the people either has to be 2 kilometers away from the launch pad. So you see one of the umbilical core has been disconnected, and 2 of them has been disconnected. These are providing. So this umbilical core is for providing. As you see, it's connected to the fairing itself, very much on top of the rocket. It is providing the electricity, communications, and battery support to the payload itself. Let's say the Mengtian segment itself. So there are different payloads that needs to be charged and electronically switched on for the whole process, so that you can follow not only the rocket itself but also the Mengtian itself before it performs a number of maneuvers. For example, once it's inserted in orbit, it has to deploy the solar panels. So all of this needs power. So the Mengtian itself is currently what we call switched on already. So it's on power. So the umbilical core provides some of the ground segment power. So once disconnected, the Mengtian itself is on its own battery until the moment it deploys its solar panel to provide more charging. So it's currently
to conserve power.
Yes. So as I said, 15 minutes and less. People have to evacuate the launch pad, and there is also a closed-up people that has some bunkers nearby. So you have to hide yourself in the bunker. So, but these are what we call environmentally friendly rockets. They do not have highly toxic fuels. So that is one thing less to worry about, because if you using conventional fuel, you have to use the mask to avoid any accidents.
But that's people being quite close to the launch pad. If you
exactly, and also people are also fueling the engine itself. So this is very much what we call it environmentally friendly. You have to just worry about the safety itself. So you have to hide to the bunker, and the disconnection of the umbilical core means that the launch is imminent. So we will have very soon the people who are gone from the launch pad itself. As we have just seen an hour ago, the journalist who was there reporting.
Right.
I think that was just about less than a kilometer.
Yeah, he said about 300 kilometers.
300 meters, yes.
300 meters away. Yeah. How far away is the ground control station then?
Oh, well, the ground control station has a whole network of different ground stations. The headquarters is in Xi'an, so they're in charge of all the controls, and their ground control station has a TTNC linkage to the satellite, to the rocket, and also the satellite itself. So there are different stations that are reporting to a whole network to control, and
tracking
also
its trajectory. And
that's the and also we have infrared tracking and also optical tracking. These stations are located on site, very close to the launch pad. As we have just seen the crowd, and just behind the crowd there's a little hill. That provides the optical observation site. So optical tracking is important for the first 10 minutes. Or first few minutes, I think, before the rocket disappears into outer space. And also, the infrared tracking can continue a little bit longer, because that when you launch the rocket, you have a lot of very big infrared footprint that can be tracked. And also, we can see from the ground, if you're seeing this on a clear day, you can see the separation of the 4 strap-down boosters. That's a few minutes after the launch. But I doubt it, in such a day. I'm not sure you can see that all the way up to the separation.
I mean, the crowds at the beach that we were seeing just now, I mean, they're a few kilometers away from this.
They are about 8 kilometers away. And you know, from the beach, you can see there are 2 structures. This structure is for the Long March 5. There's another one for Long March 8, Long March 7. So these are 2 launch pads.
And how much would they be able to see from where they are? I mean, 8 kilometers away, that seems like a long distance for them, I guess, with the visibility being a bit low. But would they be able to feel much from the launch itself? I mean, I know if you're 2 or 3 kilometers away, you can feel the vibrations, right?
They can see the lights. I mean, there's a firing from the rockets. So they can see all the way, I think, to the cloud, and also they can hear the acoustic sound of the rocket itself. 2 or 3 kilometers may be very strong, can be shaking, but this distance you can still hear it very clearly.
All right. Well, I think we are now just 10 minutes away from launch. So it's a pretty exciting moment, and the astronauts up on the space station, what do you reckon they're doing right now? I mean, the docking is going to be completely automatic. So are they just sort of just kicking back, relaxing, waiting, or is there a lot of important stuff for them to do as well?
Well, I think they're tuned in to CGTN to watch the launch. I mean, I think they're listening to the ground control and command communications. Particularly, they have to be very careful in preparation of the rendezvous docking. So as we have seen this launching, the astronauts probably have already performed a very dramatic maneuver of the station. So the station has to be turned around.
Oh, right.
The rendezvous and docking port has to be prepared, and airlock has to be prepared, and also there's also a detection of the Mengtian capsule once it's in orbit, either by radio communications, and then by laser, and then also by optical. So there are different aimings for the rendezvous and docking. So rendezvous docking is very important and very precise, because if you have a collision, that means a catastrophe, because there will be an air leak and many other things. This happened in the Russian station, called Mir station. They had this accident before, so it has to be very careful in rendezvous and docking, and very precise. You have to use laser beams and optical alignment and also control of the speed.
And they would have prepared for this.
This was prepared as this was mentioned, that this segment is prepared in Shanghai. I visited that academy, Shanghai Academy of Spacecraft Technology, Spaceflight Technology. Though they have a floating table, so they use the air to float the payloads, and then they move the payloads around by themselves to perform the rendezvous and docking testing on the table to simulate the microgravity environment. So the air floated payload has been prepared and has been
the full size.
At the full size, right. Yeah. So it's very so the table is very big, and also they perform this testing many times to avoid any unforeseeable issues.
Would the astronauts also have to train for manual docking as a backup?
Exactly. The astronaut has been trained very well for manual dockings and manual disconnections, and emergency escape plans, and there are many things that the astronaut has to be trained. So I think the astronauts currently is very knowledgeable in station, and also we have seen that these astronaut has been staying there for a sustained period of time, and this crew has welcomed 2 segments. So they have the previous one experience.
Right.
So they have something in their mind that they know what they're doing, and also Once this is done, they're expecting another crew to come by the end of this year.
6-minute countdown now. If things were to turn into a manual docking, so would it be the space station, would the astronauts be moving the space station towards the lab module itself?
Well, I think once it's turned into a manual docking, also you have to have a control on the segment that you're going to be docked.
Yeah.
If you're docking with an uncontrolled, uncooperative object, then you have to maneuver the station itself. But the station is much bigger than the Mengtian segment, so the segment has to be controlled. So even manual docking, that means teledocking by controlling the Mengtian segment to dock with the station.
And they would have control of the Mengtian segment from the space station as well, and would the control purely be with the ground staff?
The ground staff has to pre-program the whole rendezvous and docking programs,
right,
and what we call insert it into the testing of the satellite itself. And then the ground control is responsible for the rendezvous and docking at this moment. So if you switch to manual, that means the ground give all the authority to the astronauts. Yes.
Okay.
So the astronaut will have control of this spacecraft as well as the segment.
I mean, how difficult is this? I mean, I guess it's hard to sort of compare, isn't it? But we're talking. I mean, two fairly huge objects in space finding each other, but in reality, in practice, this is how challenging. What kind of difficulty level?
Well, there are two different categories. I think one is that you are working and orienting an uncooperative object. That is more challenging. For example, if you are catching an asteroid with a spacecraft, that you have to maneuver yourself around the asteroid. So this was part of the plan and the exploration programs in NASA. Another one is both objects are controlled, and you know the parameters, you know the orbit, you know the height, you know the speed. So that is relatively easy. And in particular, this one, you have the focus of the astronauts and the ground crews and the stations, and you can carefully calculate, even starting from this moment. That's happening in 5 minutes. The launching time of the segment can be controlled in such a way that once you're in orbit, you're in alignment with the spacecraft, with this station. So that is more or less, if you control the Mengtian precisely, that can have very easy rendezvous and docking. But as I mentioned in the beginning of the program, that the Mengtian is massive, and one of the largest payloads we have done so far. So maneuverability is very important, in particular once it's in orbit. The 23 metric ton needs to be maneuvered very carefully.
3-minute countdown now. But in the 3 minutes that we have, Mr. Xu, so I just want to wrap my head around something, if you're going to just explain to me. So, I mean, these objects, so the space station is, if left to its own devices, it drifts. Right, in space. So
it turns, tumbles, drifts, and comes down. I mean, we had experienced this before at the previous mission of the testing mission. That was uncontrolled somehow. So once you're not controlling this, it will come down gradually, and after 250 kilometers altitude, it comes down very quickly within weeks. So now we're talking about, for example, the International Space Station. It is fueled by the Russian. So the Russian is responsible for maintaining the altitude of the station. So you have to constantly fuel them, to propel them, to push them to an altitude, and then control them into a manner that can be flying, not tumbling, not turning. If it's uncontrolled, anything can go.
So right now, to prepare for this docking, the astronauts will have to essentially adjust the space station to the right altitude, but also attitude, right? Is this the right word for this? The attitude, kind of its relation to something else, and keep it at that precise, I suppose, angle or whatever it is that's needed. Do they have to constantly sort of keep on the controls, or can they leave the space station to sort of do its own adjustments.
But I think starting from the very first satellites, the altitude control has been automatically controlled already.
Okay.
So more or less, let's say the whole process is controlled by computer. So the position.
1 minute to go now.
So the position is very is automatically controlled, and also the attitude.
So 1 minute to go, and they were preparing for ignition very soon. And how long is the journey going to take for?
Roughly 10 minutes, because it's a very powerful engine, so it can go directly to the 400 kilometers altitude with 37 degree inclinations.
30 seconds to go to launch. There's a 20-second countdown to the ignition.
10
seconds to go.
8、7、6、5、4、3、2、1，点火！点火！
There it is. It's been ignited.
起飞，地名1503拐分2.3秒，191号秒，1503拐分2.3秒，191号秒。
Mark has lifted off. The Mengtian lab module has cleared the launch pad. They've got a pretty good view from where they are.
Exactly, and also you have heard that the technicians have reported the timing. That is a route timing for calculating the orbit. So that timing is very important for calculating when it is to be separated to orbit, and then this is very important for the preparation of rendezvous and docking. So you see, this is the optical tracking. So this can be only seen by an optical telescope.
文昌光学雷达跟踪正常，遥测向正常，文昌飞行正常。
And we're hearing a series of reports there.
It's
that are
already in the
outside.
cloud, I think. So you cannot see very
You can
clearly.
just see the flames there.
阵地112跟踪正常。
Despite the cloudy conditions, I think they're managing to get a pretty good view.
But the cloud was there for 3 days and 4 days. They have just seen about 30 seconds.
头部顶遥测向正常。
So this is the camera on board the main booster. So you're seeing two of the strap-on boosters, left and right. So this is on the core segment. You'll see very soon that this strap-on booster will be separated from the main engine, from the main body of the rocket.
And we can expect that in just a few minutes, perhaps?
Yes, I think it's happening any minute now. So we're seeing that. So you can see that there are 5 flames. One is the core flame, that is hydrogen and oxygen. So this engine has very...
It's burning out a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah. But you know, this is the engine is very particular because it's, the higher it flies, the more powerful it is. I mean, what we call it the ratio, propulsion ratio. It's more efficient once in outer space, but the kerosene is more efficient on the ground. So we're using the kerosene as a booster, and then the hydrogen and oxygen will be used for outer space flight.
饮水3901跟踪正常。
So you're seeing these strap-on boosters will be separate very soon once the fuel is burned out.
文昌光学
And
雷
then
达
they
跟
will
踪
just
正
fall
常
into，the
遥
sea?
测向正常。
They will be falling
文
into
昌
the
飞行
Pacific,
正
yes.
常。
Well, that's the whole trajectory they designed this launch site in Hainan, so that it does not fall on the ground and a habited area.
And then we're seeing that little, that's a simulation.
So that's the simulation. This, you see this is burning out, so the flame is not as powerful, so it will have a separation very soon.
And then will they be retrieved at all, or will it just be sort of left?
Current
to
plan
sacrifice?
is drop into the ocean and give it to the fish, but we do have, you see there's a separation, so that will be dropped already.
阵地112
I hear the applause.
Yes. So now the core engine is the only engine that works. We call it YF77. This is the new generation liquid carrier hydrogen and oxygen engine. So this, I think, is inside the fairing. So the next maneuver is the separation of the fairing. Once in outer space, we call it 110 kilometers altitude, the fairing will be separate. You can see the middle is the seam of the fairing. We're using some pyrotechnics to separate the fairing once it's in altitude, because there's no atmosphere to drag the rocket. So you see the separation of the fairing.
Right.
So the fairing has been dropped. So
this is all very quick, isn't it?
So yes.
A few minutes apart.
So now that means that the rocket is in outer space. There's no atmosphere at this moment. So you're seeing the images now is the Mengtian itself, the segment itself. So the next move would be the separation between the Mengtian and the rocket itself.
Right.
And the finale would be this deployment of the solar panel. So that's what would be considered as a success of the mission. That once you deploy the solar panel, that means that you have a right altitude and a right orbit,
right,
and you are ready to perform the rendezvous and docking.
So that's the main booster that's still going there, right? That we can see the simulation.
Yes, that's the what we call it the single stage rocket, because the strapped-on booster with the one engine can kick the whole payload into orbit.
I mean, obviously, the boosters carry the propellant, but once it's all used up and it's unwanted weight, it needs to be shed. But how much weight are these boosters?
Well, the boosters, this segment is about 20 metric tons, but once fully fueled, it has the rocket itself, along with the fuels, has more than 800 metric tons.
Oh, wow.
So, but once it's in orbit, the fuels are all burned out, and what you have left is the fuel container along with the engine itself. So that has, once it's in orbit, after the separation, it will slowly come down to Earth, and it will be disintegrated by burning in atmosphere. So nothing will be left, and there's no danger posed to the humankind.
It's very environmentally friendly. Nothing left.
Yes, but the separation is happening at the very high orbit, about 400 kilometers above the Earth. So the coming down of the final segment, we call it final segment, even this single segment, the final segment has to take some time. So there's a what we call it international norm or practice to what we call it passivate the final segment. Passivate by passivation we means that we discharge the batteries, we vent the containers so it does not pose an explosion danger in orbit. Because with the solar radiation, sometimes it increase the temperature, and some of the containers can fragment in space. So we use a passivation technology to make it into a dummy, so it can slowly come down to Earth and disintegrate it in atmosphere.
How long would that take?
And that can take differently. I mean, it can be years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And is this something that, would this be considered something fairly new, or is this something that's always been the norm?
This is norm. I mean, the passivation is relatively new. Before that, we don't consider passivation as very important. Now, to consider the Earth environment, you have to minimize the space debris. So passivation, as well as what we call end-of-life propulsion of the satellite, is also very important. Either you push it back to atmosphere, or you push to what we call a graveyard orbit, so that you can move away, make ways for new developments.
So how long do you think we have to wait until we see the Mengtian?
The launching is roughly 10 minutes, more or less.
Okay.
So I think in 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 4 or 5. We're seeing the end of the propulsion of the engine, because the engine has its own capacity of fuel, and fuel has to burn out, and it does not have a second kickoff. So it's a single burn. So once you see the engine cease to burn, that means that we'll have separation. But before the engine cease to burn, there has to be a control of the rocket to insert So you see they shut off the engine. So that means the separation is happening.
It's happening right now.
Yeah.
There it is, the Mengtian lab module separating from
the
Long March rocket.
What you see
that's from the rocket
that's the rocket itself. Yeah.
So the camera is on the rocket, but we're seeing the Mengtian separating from it. So it's on its way, and how long do you think before it docks?
In seconds, we'll start the deployment of the solar panels, and I think the astronauts are able to communicate now already with Mengtian, and the ground crew is to control the deployment of the solar panel before they make any movement, because the batteries are limited on board, so they have to be very careful on the next procedure. So every procedure is very carefully designed. So you see the separation. Energy. Exactly. You see the separation of the segment that does not have any major tumbles and turnings. So that means the altitude control can be easily done. So that is very important for the preparation of the docking.
So once the solar panels are deployed, that will be what primarily powers this module until it reaches the power space station.
To propel the module, it has its own engines. What we call an attitude control engine.
Which is powered by, now, its own batteries.
Not by battery, it's powered by fuel.
By the fuel, okay.
We'll call satellite fuels. And these fuels are only for spacecraft, not for rocket engine. But these are small engines that have, very small newtons of push power, so it can control the attitude of the spacecraft. The solar panels providing electricity and solar powers to power up the station, and also to provide communications and vital controls of the station.
So then the solar panels that you were saying that will be soon deployed, these big solar wings, they also are very important to powering this. Would that be powering it at all?
I think those solar panels, they're not going to deploy the big solar panels, because big solar panels has to be deployed once it's connected to the station. It's very large, and once you deploy that, it can be hard to maneuver the spacecraft. So everything that can be done to control the spacecraft for rendezvous docking is being considered at this moment. As you have just mentioned, the solar powers and electricity for propulsions, this is new technology, very new technology. We're using electricity to propel the spacecraft. We use what we call a plasma engine. This is very new technology that has been developed by some countries, in particular for smaller adjustments. So you do not have to carry fuels on board the satellite and have a longer sustain of the spacecraft in orbit. So they use to convert the electricity into propulsion. This is a very new thing that is happening at this moment.
The docking process itself, I mean, is that a very lengthy process?
Not very lengthy, but it has to. But the alignment of the docking is very lengthy, because you have to control the two spacecraft that you're going to dock at a very precise speed, and then you have to accelerate a little bit, and then you have to accelerate, also align these docking pods together. So it has to be 180 degree and very precise. Particle and vertical and horizontally precise, and the speed is very important. And you have to control the speed, and also there's an automatic locking. Once you dock that, there's a locking device, and also a connection of the fuse and pipes and cables. That is also very important. So all of this alignment takes some time, but the final docking happens just a few seconds.
Right. What's the preparation for that?
Yes, there's what we call alignment in 150 kilometers, 30 kilometers, and then 10 kilometers, 5, and then up to the meters. So for alignment, there are many maneuvers that you have to perform before you go ahead for the final docking.
Distinguished guests, their leaders, according to the flight data of Long March 5B Y4 and according to the calculation of Beijing Space Control Center, our Mengtian lab module has entered in the orbit successfully. Now I would like to announce a successful mission has been accomplished.
that announcement there officially.
Here, on behalf of the Launch Site Command Center, I would like to extend a sincere gratitude to all the distinguished colleagues and dear experts and distinguished officials for your kind support. This is the end of today's mission. Thank you very much.
And that's it. That's the last of the hardware, isn't it, for the space station?
Every time they have a launch, the screen turns red. I mean, we're so used to that reddish thing.
It's our auspicious color. So then the next stage, once this stops,